If you are new to photography and manual settings still sound a little bit like a mystery for you, stick to this video. Setting number 1, aperture, which is also known as an f-stop. It refers to how much the lens is open, which then defines how much light is let into the camera. If you want to know what it really means in practice, here is where you're going to manipulate between the beautiful, nice, blurry background with so-called bokeh, and then right the opposite, a really deep scale of the background, really strong details, keeping everything as a so-called first plan. So let's jump into practice, shall we? So I thought that the best way to illustrate that for you in practice is to choose one product and then some palm trees that are located in the background that create a bit of a distance. So thanks to this setting, I will be able to show you a beautiful difference between high and low f-stop. Let's do it. Here's our result. On the left-hand side, photo taken with a setting of f-stop 2.8. We can see the product grabbing the whole attention. The whole context of a photo is not the priority here. We can see it's set somewhere amongst the greenery. However, product is a central point and central point of attention for this photo. From the other hand, on the right-hand side, f-stop 22. Here we've got a bit more of a context of a photo where background is as important as the product itself. I would definitely recommend using this style of a photo if you want to bring more lifestyle feeling, if you want to showcase a little bit more of the story of the product, if you want to place a little bit of a storytelling within one photo itself. If you care about showcasing product only, go with a lower f-stop. All right, on to the next one. Time for focal length. Focal length is commonly known as zoom, and we all know this feature. We just move a wheel on our lens to zoom in and zoom out. But today I also wanted to show you how different a style of the photo could be if you're photographing a product, a person from the same distance, from the same place, however using a different focal length. So now I'm going to come back to my product. However, you can use and apply the same knowledge to photographing people or any other objects that you're interested in. So I'm going to start with a photo taken on a 28mm focal length, which is what we would call zoomed out photo. However, I still want to be quite close to the product, so I'm going to try to get as close as I can to still focus the whole attention of the photo on the product. Let's see what result am I going to get. And now let's compare it to a photo taken on a focal length of 75mm or so-called zoomed in photo, taken from approximately the same distance, at least as a final result. However, you'll see how different the style looks on both of those photos. Let's do it. So let's look at the result. The main difference that we can see between these two photos is the background. First thing that is important to remember is both of these photos are taken with all the same settings apart of the focal length. So again, on the right hand side, our background is pretty consistent. Palm trees are pretty chopped off. The focus is fully on the product. On the left hand side, we can see top of the palm trees. We can definitely see them clearer. And the difference here is caused by a distortion. The background is a bit more zoomed out, and I would really love to hear in the comments which photo do you prefer? Do you prefer a product photo with a focal length of 28mm or 70mm on this occasion? Another very important setting is ISO. ISO relates to sensor sensitivity to light. It means that the higher ISO you have set in your camera, the less light your sensor needs. This setting is particularly useful for photographing in dark conditions. However, remember, the higher ISO you set for your photo, the more you compromise the quality of your photo. It's all because the higher ISO you set, the more grain you get on your photo. So shutter speed, aperture and ISO are your three core settings. And at the beginning, it might feel a little bit difficult and complicated to change them all together to get the result that you want. But it's like riding a bike or driving a car. It's like once you get the feeling of it, the process is going to go smoothly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take two photos of those palm trees, one with a low ISO and another one with a higher ISO. As you can see, it's still quite bright outside, so I wouldn't need to up my ISO too high. However, for the purpose of this little lesson, I'm going to purposefully set my camera in a way to make the whole area a bit darker than I would normally, and take a first photo with a low ISO and then show you a difference with a higher ISO. The difference between these two photos is quite obvious. Photo on the left-hand side, ISO 250, purposefully made darker when it comes to settings. Left-hand side, ISO 250, right-hand side, ISO 2500. And it might sound like a no-brainer for you that whenever you struggle with lights, you up your ISO as high as you need to get a photo well lit. However, I purposely cut out a little cropped in sample that you can see in the right bottom corner on each of those photos. And here you can clearly see the quality compromise that you're making. When it comes to a sample taken with an ISO 200, we can see that our palm tree is still clear, it's still well visible, the quality is nicer, the colors are well kept. When it comes to a sample with an ISO 2500, we can clearly see a loss of a quality when you crop in that palm tree. So the colors go a little bit more, everything seems a little bit more blurry, so-called pixelated image. If you're planning to print your photos on a great scale, this is where these differences are really going to come out and be visible. Another very important setting is shutter speed. The shutter speed defines the amount of time that's going to be allowed into your sensor as you take a photo. And this exact setting is going to affect two important things. First of all, brightness of your photo. And the second thing is either a frozen effect on your photo or a motion effect. It's particularly important for photographing things, objects and people in motion, such as sports photography to wild animals or bird photography. And once again, let's try it in practice. And here is the result. Let's compare these two photos. When it comes to the top photo, shutter speed was set for 2.5 seconds. It means that I allowed my camera to keep the shutter open for 2.5 seconds. So as we can see, the water looks still, it looks very flat, and the whole landscape was moving. Everything became a bit blurry as the movement was captured. So here, our shutter speed was set on 100th part of a second. So it basically means that the movement was frozen, it was captured as it was. And finally, less light was allowed into the camera because it was captured for a less amount of time. It means that the light was allowed into my camera for a much shorter amount of time, so that light had to be sourced from somewhere else. Therefore, our f-stop was set on 3.2. When it comes to higher shutter speed, I would definitely recommend you to grab your camera and experiment out there in the nature, especially if you have any water available around you. As you can see, you can create some really amazing effects. And finally, white balance. So white balance is responsible for the temperature on our photo. It varies from the cold to warm feeling, and this particular setting allows you to be a little bit more creative. You can experiment with it as you're taking a photo as well as in a post-production. If you're wondering when is it that my white balance is right, the thing that I always thought is, you know that your white balance is right when your photo looks most neutral. In practice, it means that you're trying to get as close as you can to make it complete neutral, natural as your eye would see it. The first thing I want to say is that when it comes to these photos, I set white balance on a completely extreme opposite levels just to show you the difference. If I was meant to do a final edit on it, I would definitely put a white balance somewhere in between these two, because one is way too blue, one is way too yellow. But just to illustrate to you the difference between these two. Alright, that's it for today. I've been Eva from Destination Collective, and if you're new to this channel and you want to learn more about photography, videography and digital marketing, please subscribe. See you next time.